So let's have a look at some example shots that I'm going to do with the Rotolight Anova Pro 2, and we're also going to do some comparisons against the Luxley Timpani and also the Lupo Super Panel Full Color 30. So first off, this is the Rotolight Anova Pro 2 set at 5600 Kelvin. The light's output was set at 36% to get correct exposure, and the camera is at 5600 Kelvin using a preset white balance, just so that we can see exactly what the light looks like at 5600 Kelvin using a preset white balance. So it all looks pretty nice here with the Rotolight Anova Pro 2. Now here is the exact same settings. All I've done this time is done a manual white balance on the camera and kept the light at 5600 Kelvin, just so we can see what it looks like and the skin tones and the sort of general look that we're getting from the light. So reasonably nice and accurate, maybe leaning a tiny bit towards the green side here after balance, but the skin tones look pretty good. So here's the Rotolight Anova at 52%, and we're using the Rotolight softbox that's available with the Frost diffusion, which is there's two different diffusions that come with the softbox. This is the lesser of the two, so this is using that softbox with a manual white balance. Again, here's the exact same thing again. Now we're at 52%, and we're using the Frost with a 5600K preset white balance now on the camera, just to see how it reacts when using the light at 5600 Kelvin. And as you can see, it looks quite nice skin tone rendering, and the illumination is nice on the subject's face. So here we go again. This is now the Rotolight Anova Pro 2 at 95%, and we're using the stronger diffusion with the optional softbox. So as you can see, we've obviously had to turn up the output of the light quite substantially to get correct exposure, but looks nice on our subject. And finally, the last one here, let's have a look at the same conditions. This is with a manual white balance now, with the diffusion and the softbox being used. Reasonably sort of neutral looking image, skin tones still look nice. Reasonably nice sort of soft wrapping light that's going around our subject's face. So let's do those exact same tests again, this time with the Luxley Timpani 1x1 RGB AW light set at 5600 Kelvin. As you can see here, it's at 36% output, which was exactly the same as what we were using for the Rotolight. So they have sort of an equal sort of amount of power at this distance, even though they've got different beam spreads and different outputs. This is the 5600K preset white balance with the Luxley. This one here, this is now the exact same situation. We're just using a manual white balance now, and as you can see, I mean, the Luxley probably leans a little bit more towards the warm tones than say the Rotolight, but the skin tones look nice and pleasing, and the image quite nice and neutral, and the light looks pretty good considering it doesn't have much of diffusion built into the front of that light. So now this is the Luxley Timpani, and we're using a softbox with a grid on here, and we're at 100% output, and as you can see, it's cutting the light quite substantially, and we're probably a little bit under exposed here, but I just wanted to keep all the lights in the exact same position just to show you the differences here. Again with the manual white balance, maybe leaning a little bit sort of warm with the skin tones, a little bit of green maybe in the background light. So this is now with a preset 5600K white balance at those same settings, and as you can see, a little bit warm probably in terms of the tones that are on our subject's face, but everything looking sort of quite natural and fairly neutral as far as colours go. So now let's do the Lupo Super Panel 1x1 Full Color 30 RGB W light, again set at 5600 Kelvin. Here we are here, it's only at 30% output, and this is using a 5600K preset white balance in the camera. As you can see, it probably leans a little bit more towards the colder tones than the other two lights, and you can see just a little bit of a slight push towards green in the background colouring there, but the skin tones still look fairly nice and neutral. It's the same shot again. This time we're doing a manual white balance, and as you can see, it's still maybe, the skin tone's looking good. It definitely has sort of a bit of a lean towards the colder tones than either the Luxley or the Rhodolite, but still looks quite nice. It does have a lot wider beam angle than the other two lights, so you can see it's illuminating up a lot more of the background than you'll see with the other two. So here's the Lupo here again at 45%, and we're just using a grid. So it's just an egg crate grid to reduce that spill, and you can see the difference in terms of where the light's getting directed here. Again, nice natural looking image. There's a bit more sun now coming through the background through that window on the right hand side, but nice neutral looking image with the Lupo. So now here's the Lupo with a manual white balance. We're at 45%. We're using the grid here again to just take that light off the background, give it a bit more depth, and nice sort of natural looking image. Again, there's quite a bit of sun coming through that window, which is making it look a little bit warmer than the other shots were before. But again, a nice looking image. So now let's do a comparison here between the Rhodolite Anova Pro 2 and the Luxley Timpani. So firstly, this is the Rhodolite. This is at 5600K with a 5600K preset white balance, and what we'll do eventually here is we'll just do a wipe through to the Luxley Timpani, just so you can see the difference between the two shots. So here we go, we'll wipe through. Both lights are the exact same settings. The camera white balance exactly the same for both shots here, just to give you a comparison to see the difference in terms of what it's doing in terms of rendering colors and what it looks like on skin tones, and the sort of quality of the light that you're getting from both of these fixtures. So again, we're going to do the same thing now with the Rhodolite Anova Pro 2 again, and this time we're going to do a wipe between the Lupo Super Panel 30 RGBW light and the Rhodolite, just so you can see the difference between those two. So firstly, here is the Rhodolite, and eventually here we're going to do that same wipe through again, so you can see a difference straight away to see the comparison. Now here is the Lupo, and you can definitely see a lot more sort of colder tones here, and maybe a little bit sort of a push towards green a little bit there with the rendering, but the skin tones still look good. But two completely different looks from these two different lights. But it's just a good comparison to do, just to see exactly what you're getting. When you're looking at a light, because they're all slightly different. So now let's just compare the Rhodolite Anova Pro 2 and the Luxley Timpani in a split screen comparison this time. Both lot fixtures being used at 5600K with a preset white balance of 5600 in the camera, just so you get a comparison between the two. Both the skin tones look good. It's a personal choice as to what you like. Maybe the Luxley's got a little bit more sort of red in there, whereas the Rhodolite looks a little bit warmer. So now let's do that same split screen comparison between the Rhodolite Anova Pro 2 and the Lupo Super Panel Full Color 30. And as you can see, a lot warmer image. I mean, the skin tones still look good on both of them. The Lupo obviously a little bit cooler in terms of its look compared to the Rhodolite. But the skin tones look good, and it's a personal preference as to what you would actually prefer. The Rhodolite probably more neutral of those two particular lights. So now let's have a look at the Rhodolite Anova Pro 2, the Luxley Timpani, and the Lupo Super Panel in a 3-up display. I've highlighted the Rhodolite in the top left-hand corner there, just so you can see here, using a preset 5600K white balance, the difference between all three of the lights. And you can definitely see that the Lupo is a little cooler and a push towards green down the bottom there compared to the other two lights. Now let's do a split screen comparison between the Rhodolite Anova Pro 2 and the Luxley Timpani. This is with a manual white balance having been done on the camera. And as you can see, the Luxley probably cleans up a little bit more than the Rhodolite here, in terms of being maybe a tad more neutral than the Rhodolite, but skin tones both looking good on both of those. Again, this is the same comparison with a manual white balance between the Rhodolite Anova Pro 2 and the Lupo this time. As you can see, the Lupo still probably pulls a little bit towards green a little bit, but you can see the skin tones have a little bit of a red tinge, whereas with the Rhodolite the skin tones are maybe a little bit warmer there after doing the white balance. But again, personal preference as to which one that you prefer. Now let's have a look at a manual white balance split screen comparison between all three of these lights. The Rhodolite highlighted in the top left hand corner, and as you can see, the Rhodolite and the Luxley fairly sort of similar in terms of their look. The Lupo is still nice skin tones, but the background obviously a little cooler and a little bit of sort of a push towards green there with the extra light spill. But again, all three of those images look pretty good. So now let's have a look at a split screen comparison between the Innova Pro 2 and the Luxley here, with using a softbox on both of them, just to see the difference in terms of what the softbox is doing in terms of output and sort of shaping the light and softening it up. And both of them doing okay. The Luxley softbox being used here is obviously knocking the output down quite a bit. It's a little bit probably underexposed. I've got it ramped up to 100% there. Now let's do that same comparison again with a preset 5600K white balance, and this is going to be between the Rhodolite on the bottom and the Lupo Super Panel at the top. And you can see the Lupo Super Panel, it's a lot punchier light with a lot wider beam spread, and it's probably producing a slightly softer looking light source here, used in conjunction with the grid. It's already got a built-in diffusion panel, so there's no real point in using a softbox necessarily with that light. And finally, let's just have a look at an output and beam spread comparison when all three lights are set at 5600K and a 5600K preset white balance is being used. So firstly, this is the Rhodolite. So you can see our setup here, and it's just to see how much light's being thrown around and the output strength in terms of what you're getting between all three of these different lights. So this is what the Rhodolite looks like. And all these three of these lights are all at the 100% output, by the way, and they're all at the exact same distance and haven't been moved. And this is the Luxley Tympani here. As you can see, it's got a slightly wider beam angle at 72 degrees, and it's illuminating a little bit more of an area than the Rhodolite. And then finally here we've got the Lupo. It's got a very wide 115 degree beam angle, and as you can see, it's obviously lighting up a lot more of the area and looks a lot punchier than the other two lights when used in this exact same situation. And just to wrap things up, we'll do again a 3-up display here, so you can see the difference between all three of these lights. The Rhodolite highlighted there in the top left-hand corner, the Tympani on the right, and then the bottom left you can see the Lupo. So you can clearly see the difference between how all three of those lights beam spread and output looks.